Welcome, everybody, to Self-Made Millionaire Tips. Colin Plume, CEO of Noble Gold Investments and founder of My Digital Money. And we've talked a lot of for-profit business. Now we're going to talk to someone in nonprofit and really talk about different ways that you can make money. There's a lot of different ways you can make money in nonprofit, which I would say is a win-win, which is exciting. And I'm here today with my friend Randall Freed, or Randy Freed, depending on who's asking. Randy is a Jewish communal professional based in Los Angeles. He's the director of philanthropic engagement and communication at SEDEC America. For the past 20 years, Randy is also engaged in Jewish education as an educator for teens and adults, working for a number of most notable synagogues in Los Angeles. And he's been spending the past 15 years teaching anti-Semitism, Holocaust history, and the Jewish history of Poland. He also has been working in a number of different capacities, different cities, Studio City in different areas. He's a graduate of UCLA, man of a lot of things. This guy's got a lot of information, knows a lot about wine too, which is great. I don't know if that's what we're talking. I don't think we're talking about that today.
We should have some.
You have to have more money for that, because that's the joke. Is you have to have a big fortune to make a small fortune
in the wine business.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And all the wine drinking we've done has been strictly for education. Right,
Yes.
that's really what we've been focusing on, is education. He's married, amazing wife, 2 beautiful children, and thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So tell us about, I know you, in your work history, you were a financial advisor. You started on that side, and then you switched lanes. What made you switch lanes? What did you like about that? And why did you go in a different direction?
Sure. Well, I mean, don't mean to bring the conversation down so quickly, but just kidding. So I was working with Northwestern Mutual. It's a great company. I still love the company. One of my best mates from there, he's now my advisor. And so it's a great business, great income can be made from it, and I loved my colleagues. And yet there's a part of me that felt maybe something was missing. So in 2011, my father unexpectedly passed away. And then 2.5 years later, my mother passed away. And so it really started me thinking about, what do I want to do? I think that the loss of a parent starts a process, an internal conversation, right? You're losing kind of a sail or a part of your rudder if you're envisioning yourself as a ship. And so how do you write that? How do you write the course? And so in that process, I thought, I've always moonlighted in some kind of Jewish education, which is funny because I hated religious school. There's an article actually you can look up that says Hebrew School Horror Stories, and the opening story is about me from the LA Jewish Journal. And I hated it. I didn't know why there were so many Israeli women teaching that were so angry. Anyway,
That's a whole other thing.
Well, it's a whole other thing, but it's kind of a joke if you're in Jewish education. But in the end, my mother made very positive advice to me. She said, if you don't like something, fix it. And so I got involved while I was at university and teaching, and then it's kind of kept doing it even though I was working as a full-time financial advisor. And so after my parents passed away, I said, I think I'm going to switch full-time and just do something that I'm passionate about, and I was very fortunate to do so.
So you actually followed your passion.
Yeah.
That's great. A lot of people don't do that, especially I think people are afraid at a certain point in their life they feel like they can't start over, and you did, and you've done very well doing it. So
How long were you in the finance business before you shifted?
So let's see, 2001 to 2016, 15 years. Yeah.
What are the biggest misconceptions about working in nonprofit? Is that you don't make any money, and it's just kind of a difficult grind business. Would you say that's an accurate statement?
I think that it's, there's a stand-up comedian who makes a joke, actually. He says, so you make money from nonprofit? And it's like, yeah. He's like, I don't know, it sounds shady. But the truth is that in nonprofit, you do make money. The status of the organization, that's taxes, right? But certainly, like if we look at the CEO of the American Red Cross, she makes, I believe, north now of $650,000 is her base, not counting her bonus. So most people would argue if you're making north of $500,000, that's pretty good living.
Great leader.
And there's a number of other notable nonprofits where they're making $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 a year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of raising money, I think that's, you have a very long title, but I think a big part of your job is raising money for
Yes.
the organization. And how are you able to do that in today's environment? I think there's obviously risk of a recession, and people are a little tighter than they probably have been in the past. What have you been able to do? How are you able to continue to raise money in this environment?
Well, I think for people that work in nonprofit, there's two sides of the coin. You have people that are really interested they believe in the cause, and then there's people that are really motivated and believe in the results. Not the results don't matter, but I think that if you believe in the cause, you're at an advantage, number one. Number two is your ability to tell a story. And so I imagine, just as similar to sales and the gold business, there's a story that you're telling. And fundraising is no different. It's, can I tell you a story that you want to be a part of? If I'm saying people like us do this with our money, so it moves other people to action. And so for me anyway, that's been a big part of it, is being able to build a relationship and tell stories. And then if you can say that from a trustworthy, authoritative point of view, then that works. I also think that if you're honest with your donors, you're also able to raise money. So a lot of people will say, like, they'll be at the big, we've all seen it, the countdown timer that's saying, we have this much time left to raise money. And you can do that, or the people that stand outside of Whole Foods, or the firefighters that'll stop traffic with their boot out to raise money. And it's almost like they're going to shame you into raising $10 here or $15 there. And you can raise a ton of money, and there are nonprofits that do it all day, every day.
Sure.
But I think that if you have, like, let's say 1,000 loyal donors or less, then you don't need to harass people to get you to give, right? If you find one person that gives $3 million or $5 million, it's because they see that there's actually a greater value. They're giving you 3, but it's actually worth 5. Or if they give you 5, it's worth 8 in meaning to them.
Where do you find these $3 million donors? I guess that's let's talk about that. I know Fairlane wants to know that too. You rolled it off the tongue like these people are just walking around everywhere.
They're not.
The streets.
I think. Well, no. I think you mentioned it's a grind, and I think that anything worth doing, and if you believe in the cause, then there's going to be a grind element, right? For example, Seth Godin gave a talk about fundraising, and he makes it analogous to the idea that it's like becoming a heart surgeon, so long as you never have a patient that dies. Well, that's not realistic. And so in the world of development, or similar to the world of sales, you can't say, I'm only going to sell stuff provided no one ever says no to me, right? So I think that the more no's you get, the closer to a yes you get. And so I've had plenty of no's, and I'm very lucky in that way, because it allows me to then take them off the field,
right,
if you will.
Right.
That either they're not the type of person that the work of Tzedek America speaks to, they're racist, then it wouldn't work. No, kidding. So then
Right.
we can just say, like, it's not a fit for you, and that's
Sure.
fine. There's a lot of great causes, and, it's on to the next.
Right. And I think, you're right. In the world of sales, it is a numbers game, and it is a lot of that where you're just, you're beating out a lot of doors. In terms of, like, your relationships with people, what are some of the things that someone that maybe wants to get into this business, what are some of the things that they can do to, get past the gatekeepers, or how do you bridge that gap? How do you do that as a
Climb through a window? No, I think one idea is sometimes, one is being persistent. So a lot of times I think a brush off will be like, I'm not interested, call me in 30 days. Email me in 60 days. And so the truth is that a lot of people
just give up?
are like, no problem, I'll be in touch. But because they didn't take a note, they didn't flag it in their calendar,
Right.
and there's like 101 different apps that can help with our management of time. So they're not utilizing that. And so then the follow-up never happens. And then the potential gift
What if they
happens.
ghost your call after 30 or 60 days? They were just trying to get you off the phone. Like, how do you get in there?
So there's a few things. I think I think you have to think about, depending on how much energy to put into them. But until someone flatly says no, then I don't see why you don't keep
the door open.
politely. And there's different ways to do it. So, for example, and something that I like doing, so I'll flag, and Google is I don't want this to be a Google commercial, but, and there are other apps that will do this for you. You can highlight someone's name, and you can say, like, I want alerts anytime this person's name or their company comes up in any kind of news. And so if it comes up, then you can send an email that says, it's not necessarily saying, hi, hello again, it's me. I wanted to ask you for money. They know why you're calling.
Sure.
But you're saying, hi, by the way, I just saw this article pop up that your son was honored for XYZ, or your wife was honored for at an award at some museum or something.
Sure.
Just wanted to say, so exciting. Great to have you as a part of the community. Congratulations.
Right.
Look forward to when we can catch up. And so I think you're always, in nonprofit work, you're always looking for where is the touch point. And ideally, in stewarding the relationship, whether they're a new donor, prospective donor, or an old donor, you're always looking for those opportunities to reach out so that you're not just, they're like, oh, he's calling again because he wants to run my credit card.
Right, exactly. It's just a way to open the door.
Right.
And I think that's great. I don't think I was aware of that through Google, that you could have that, but that's a great tip. I mean, that makes a lot of, and I think in any sales business you could use that tip. So that I appreciate that. Let's talk about Sedec America.
Sure.
You guys recently did a trip, and you did a trip to Memphis and a few other locations. Can you kind of briefly tell us about that trip and who went and
Sure.
what's the idea behind it?
Sure. So Sedec America as an organization started in 2014, running a gap year program, and then quickly pivoted to do immersive educational experiences. So if you talk to a lot of teachers nowadays and we think about pedagogy, they would say that one of the best ways to learn something is actually through an experience versus, and we know that as adults, right? So if you go to a cooking class versus watching it on TV, it's like, oh my God, the smells and I got my hands dirty, I wore an apron.
You're actually doing it.
Right. And you're creating community with the people that you did it. So Sedec America decided that organizationally we will do social justice immersive education experiences. So one of our many programs that we do is we take students to the South to learn about the civil rights. So all of us in the room probably learned on some level about civil rights in this country, civil rights movement,
right,
and the sacrifices made. However, standing, for example, on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and speaking to someone who grew up on Martin Luther King's lap, or speaking to Elaine Lee Turner, who her family, the Lee family, was one of the most arrested families during the civil rights movement, and hearing her story in Memphis, Tennessee, about how she was a part of the original Memphis 9 that helped desegregate the schools, that's a much more immersive experience. So we take students from all over the country, schools from all over. The trip that I was recently on was with the junior class from D. Toledo High School out in the Valley, and it's transformative. They go from, we were in Birmingham, Alabama, we were in Montgomery, we were all over the South, and we tried to make it, on the one hand, looking globally at a social justice issue, because the civil rights movement in America was not just about the rights of blacks. It was perhaps in a moment of time, but moreover, it was a watershed moment for civil rights movements of all kinds, whether it was a movement for the American Disabilities Act, looking at rights for Asian Americans, looking at rights for those that are Latino. Kind of every civil rights movement in America was inspired by and informed by the civil rights movement in the 1960s.
So the idea with Sedec America in a nutshell is you can only get so much from a book or from the internet or until you are on the ground. So that's the idea behind this organization, is getting on the ground and talking to people that either lived it or people that are immersed in this every day, and that hopefully brings more awareness, right? Would you say that?
I would say it's more than just awareness. I think that certainly, for example, another program we run is we take students down to Nogales, Arizona, so they can be at the border. And the truth is, we want them to get past all the headlines, because of course in our the politics of the day, we tend to be in echo chambers with social media, and and the algorithms are designed for that, right? If you click on one video, the next thing you know, it's showing up in everywhere else in your social media world. And so we want to get people past that. So when we're in Nogales, Arizona, they're speaking to everyone and hearing perspectives from good Samaritans who are putting water out in the middle of the desert because they feel that human movement is a human right, to then meeting with Border Patrol agents who are talking about the other realities of and legalities of those crossing the border, and talking to former ICE agents, and talking to DACA recipients, and talking to businesses positively and negatively impacted by the flow of immigration, illegal immigration into the United States. And so one is, of course, to inform them of the issues, get past the talking points. Two, though, really is to hopefully activate them. We're not trying to give them answers. Rather, we want them to be vested in the topic. These big social justice issues that we face in the United States, they're kind of evergreen issues because I would argue that we're not spending enough time, one, actually engaging and talking to people to actually know what's happening on the ground, though we all seem to have an opinion. And two, then once you know that, hopefully you feel vested and you're going to want to do something about it.
Sure, absolutely. No, it's a very interesting nonprofit. I think it's before you started working there, I never heard of anyone that was doing anything like this. So it's something that's I think more people need to learn about. So we're talking about social media. We're talking about perception. We're talking about what's happening in the world out there. Bringing it back to you and talking about you and your journey. Tell us about where you are now today. You've been working for Sedec America for a few years. What are you doing besides Sedec America? What else is going forward, and where are you going to go in the next 3 to 4 years?
Wow, great question. I think the short answer is going forward. The more detailed story would be, aside from working at Sedec America, I also am a regular speaker with the Speakers Bureau of the World Jewish Congress, which is a representative body of Jewish communities around the world, representing 114 Jewish communities around the world, and speaking on issues of Holocaust education, Holocaust legacy, anti-Semitism, so a lot of public speaking. Also, oddly enough, many years ago, I had the pleasure and honor of officiating a friend's wedding, and so that friend led to another friend, and through referrals, and suddenly I'm officiating a number of weddings.
I heard you're booked. You can't even know. There's so many people.
And it's a lot of fun, actually. Well, the truth is, again, it's that idea going back to what my mother said, if you don't like something, just fix it. So basically, and anyone listening probably can relate, where they went to a wedding and either their officiant or they watched someone, and the officiant totally blew it. They said something about the person, and it was totally not true, because a lot of officiants either they read from the size 9 shoe fits all script, and they don't take the time to get to know the couple.
Well, I think I've told you my story. Is we got married by a judge in Mexico, and to have a legal wedding in Mexico, you need a judge,
right?
And his cell phone went off twice during the ceremony, so that wasn't great. And then he forgot that I was going to say my own vows and started walking off and sort of was done. And so
How long was it?
How long was the ceremony?
Yeah.
Not long at all. Not long at all.
He just wanted it done.
He was done. He wanted to know where lunch was.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's important to have, and luckily our saving grace is that my wife looked beautiful. Everybody was tan, and probably had a few drinks. I think maybe things sort of.
Well, that's always the joke. It's better to have something go wrong in your wedding than have something go wrong in your marriage. So
that's true.
This is
true.
It's a small blessing, truthfully. But so it's something that I also do, and actually from your own encouraging and others, I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book. Of course, that's a much harder task than it sounds. But the idea of writing a book and the idea of speaking more, since it's something that I enjoy and I've been doing at least for a few thousand teens over the last 15 years. So leaning into that, and we'll see where it takes me.
Yeah, I think the book is really exciting. I can't wait to read the first draft. And
But what will it be about?
That's a great question. Well, as we were saying earlier, I do believe that everyone has a story. Maybe we'll agree to disagree that
I don't agree that everyone has a story. I'm in the
all stories are interesting.
Well, everyone has a story. I don't think they're all interesting. That's what I was going to say.
So I think it's a little bit about my own journey and thinking about legacy in terms of my own journey, and that would be what the book's about.
Yeah.
Can you expound a little bit?
Sure. So as I was saying before, so the short version of it was a cloudy Tuesday, beautiful weather, breeze. No kidding. So I was and I said I wasn't going to say that joke, but it's too good, and I'm a dad, so it works. I say those kind of jokes. So I think the reality is for me that I was adopted at birth from El Salvadorian and Spanish parents who, for whatever reason, decided adoption was the way to go. So they said adios. My mom and dad adopted me, so I grew up in a very Jewish household, and that's been my life. I was 6 days old, so I don't really know anything from where I'm from in a way. And at the same time, I know a lot about where I'm from my adoptive family, and I don't even qualify them. I just say my family. And so to me, thinking about and learning about that then makes me also think about what is the legacy? What is the legacy that I've inherited? What is the legacy, perhaps elements of a legacy that I'm unaware of? Where is that intersection? And as a parent of 2 little kids, what is the legacy that both my wife and I are creating for our family? And so that's sort of what the book's about.
Exciting book. No, I think everyone's going to love it when it comes
I see
out.
a follow-up question, I sense.
Yeah.
Sense.
But okay, so that's very interesting. But I
Sure.
guess everyone knows of the romantic side of leaving something behind,
Sure.
right? But what specifically do you think makes this story different?
That's a good question. You'll have to wait to buy the book. But
we
what I
can't
would
give it
so
all
what
away,
I
right?
but what I would say though actually is that I don't know that it's all just romantic, and I think that although we would gloss over and say that it's all romantic, the reality is that life is punctuated. Oops, it's almost intentional, but not really. That life is punctuated with a lot of less rosy things. I'll even throw it back to social media. You know, we scroll through our social media today, and it looks like everybody has a perfect life. Everyone is having wine. Everyone is in great shape. Even if they're not in great shape, they clearly have lots of money, and they're attending exclusive events. And the reality is that's not life, but that's the romantic side of things. And I think that what makes it interesting is talking about, and everyone has something, but, losing my father unexpectedly 2 weeks after I was engaged, that's not all romantic. And so what is the impact of that? Being someone who's Jewish and growing up with information and knowing always about the Holocaust, so we can talk about what kind of trauma, if any, does that impart into the story or into the legacy? I would argue that's also not romantic. So I think my mother was chronically ill my whole life, so what, if anything, did that impact in my life? I think that, too, is less romantic. But so I think that it's a combo of how that informs and influences. And, of course, just me being me, I'm going to borrow from other sources and talk about the concept of legacy and being a good ancestor more broadly, to include the less rosy stuff.
I don't think they're going to turn your story into the Book of Mormon.
No, I don't think. I doubt it.
I don't think there's going to be a danced version of this.
So just being nosy, how much of your El Salvador family, or do you know?
I don't know anyone. I apparently have hundreds of cousins, according to Ancestry.com and 23andMe. And my boss actually says, because I keep saying I think I'd like to go to El Salvador, and he's like, "Well, when you do, I'm bringing a camera crew."
Don't bring your checkbook though.
Yeah. So look, I'm curious about it. I mean, it's something obviously, and it's a part of who I am, and I think it's also just interesting in the work that I do, how we're so quick to qualify and kind of categorize people when we look at them and make judgments. And I think that, and actually my El Salvadorian piece has become, I don't want to say token, but in a way it has, just in confusing people to talk about the assumptions that we make.
Right. Yeah. So maybe second to the last question before you throw your last question. Given that you're now writing your book, you're working in nonprofit, and you're very much immersed with the young people, what do you think? Does social media make things better in informing people of what's actually happening in the ground, or is it actually damaging?
Yes and yes. I think that, so let's just think about 9/11 as an example. So 9/11, obviously a worldwide generational moment, especially as Americans. And there were news cameras. We all remember those images, right, with the crawl on the bottom of the screen and looking at the towers smoking, that something had struck the towers. And the power of social media today is that everything we saw was from a safe distance, zoomed in, and we saw the tragedy of people jumping out of their windows. The difference of social media today and the power of our phones potentially is that someone would have suddenly been live streaming and said, "I'm on the 72nd floor and I can't get down." So there is that power of social media that can bring us into a moment, and we're seeing it even in the war that's playing out in Ukraine, where you do have at moments when the city was being shelled, people jumping on their phones and doing live and saying, "I'm going to tell you what's really happening here outside of Odessa or here in Kiev," watching, and you're hearing explosions in the background. So that's good. But the other part is that not good is that oftentimes it's through whatever I always say to teens, even when we're looking at pictures from World War II, that were from inside the Warsaw Ghetto or they're inside of war scenes, and I'm like, you have to always ask yourself, who is taking the picture? And what is the motivation behind the person that's taking this picture? And the same today would be who's filming the video, and what is the motivation behind the video that's being filmed? I think all too often the reason I think it's damaging is because teens are too quick to accept what they're seeing. Like, oh, well, if it's on TikTok, it must be true. Right. Versus saying, what is the filter that I'm running this through? We're so obsessed with bottled water in this country, even though we have potable water in most places, right? We're like, oh, where's my Brita? Where's this? It's got to be extra pure. It's through a glacier. So we do that for what we put in our bodies physically, but we've skipped that when we think about what we're putting in our minds through social media and what we're watching, and we're not asking some of those critical questions.
Yeah, not taking everything as a trusted source. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Absolutely.
Is taking a step back. So the pro of the social movement is you get something on the ground that maybe we never would have got.
Right. Puts you in the moment inside.
You have to think about who's taking the video, who's taking the picture, and then also think about who's controlling the medium, the algorithm, right? We know that there's different algorithms out there that can push different agendas, so that has to be part of the conversation too. And I think that, when people see stuff about me or whatever on social or anybody, they immediately take a perception of what it is. And a lot of times it's the perception that as marketers, we know it's the perception we want, right? I mean, we can put out there the way we want it and spin it the way we want it. So you're right. I think it comes down to part of what you're doing is teaching critical thinking, right? With these teens. And that's, that's something that you enjoy and you love. And I think it's a great story that you've transitioned from something that I'm sure you could have done well in, but now you're making a great living and also doing something that you're passionate about, which is pretty rare out there. And so self-made multi-millionaire tips. This is Randy. Great story. Book's coming out. Exciting.
Website
is
coming soon.
Website is coming. Weddings, speaking, he's can't miss. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
When the book's out, we'll get you back on. Again.
Sounds great.
And thanks everybody today. Colin Plume, CEO of Noble Gold Investments, My Digital Money, and we'll check you on the next episode here.